Up next in the broadcast, Red Cross officials from South and North Korea meet today to discuss the resumption of reunions for families still separated by the Korean War. South Korea successfully sends the Arirang 5 satellite into space. The multi-purpose satellite allows the nation for the first time to receive high-resolution radar images day or night and rain or shine. International powers are calling for an immediate probe into accusations that the Syrian government used a chemical attack against its own people. Primetime News begins now.
Good evening and welcome to Primetime News. It's Friday, August 23rd here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Yoo Ji-hye.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thank you so much for joining us. After nearly 12 hours of marathon negotiations, the two Koreas have agreed to the date, the venue, and the scale of reunions for families separated during the Korean War.
For more details, let's go live to our correspondent at the Unification Ministry, our Hwang Sung-hee. Sung-hee, fill us in on the latest.
The two Koreas agreed to hold face-to-face reunions from September 25th to the 30th to coincide with Chuseok, or Korean Thanksgiving holiday. The reunions will take place at Mount Kumgang over in the north with 100 family members from each side. Now, this will be the first reunions for the divided families since October of 2010. Now, going into today's talk, Seoul had proposed to hold the reunion in either Seoul or Pyongyang to reunite as many family members as possible. The ideal number of participants for the South was about 200 from each side. While Seoul seems to have given in to North Korea's proposal, the two sides agreed to hold another round of reunions sometime in November this year and to meet for further discussions on the issue immediately after the first reunion next month. The two sides will also hold video reunions for 2 days from October 22nd to 23rd with 40 families from each side.
Like you said, this will be the first such reunion in 3 years. Can you walk us through the preparations for the event?
That's right, Sean. Each side will begin conducting checkups for the surviving family members starting next week. As you know, these are the families that have been separated since the Korean War in the 1950s, so most of them are over the age of 70. The two Koreas will exchange their final lists of participants on September 16th. The Unification Ministry says technical preparations for the reunion won't take long as the Mount Kumgang Resort was the site of such reunions in the past and is therefore well equipped for the event. The Koreas agreed to work towards holding reunions on a regular basis, as well as allowing them to exchange letters as part of efforts towards a fundamental solution to the issue of divided families. Guys?
All right, Sung-hee, thank you for that report. That was our Hwang Sung-hee reporting us to live from the agreement reached between the two Koreas over family reunions that are now scheduled for September 25th through the 30th. And amid thawing inter-Korean relations, a North Korean man defected to the South on early Friday morning.
And on top of that, we're also learning that a South Korean abducted by the North 41 years ago escaped the North earlier this month and will soon come home. Park Ji-won tells us more.
South Korean fisherman Jeon Uk-pyo was one of 25 people abducted by North Korea in December 1972 when 2 fishing boats were seized by North Korea. Jeon was 27 years old at the time. 41 years after being taken, the 68-year-old abductee finally escaped the North earlier this month. This is according to the president of the abductees' family union, Choi Sung-yong, who spoke on Friday. Choi said the abductee is now safe in another country under official protection by the Korean government and will be arriving in South Korea soon. Choi also released a letter that Jeon sent to President Park Geun-hye expressing his wish to spend the rest of his life in his hometown and a desire to be buried on South Korean soil. Meanwhile, another North Korean man defected to South Korea on early Friday. The 46-year-old defector knocked on the door of a home on Kyodong Island in the West Sea at around 3:40 a.m. Officials believe the man swam across the maritime border to the western island. Authorities are currently questioning the man about his motivation for defecting to the south. Experts say it remains to be seen how this will affect the current improvement in inter-Korean relations. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Over now to the meeting between President Park Geun-hye and UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. The two leaders on Friday discussed ways to increase cooperation between Korea and the UN on pending global issues.
Our presidential office correspondent Oh Jin-ju has more on how restoring peace on the Korean peninsula was at the top of the agenda.
President Park called for UN support in creating a peace park along with the two Koreas in the demilitarized zone. In her second meeting with UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon since taking office in February, the president emphasized that the peace park would be of great help in easing tensions on the peninsula and building trust between the South and North. In response, the UN chief vowed to actively cooperate in creating the peace park and give detailed advice on setting up a regulatory framework, but only after the two Koreas come to an agreement on the matter first. Meanwhile, President Park promised to continue providing North Korea with humanitarian aid regardless of the political situation as part of her push for a trust-building process with Pyongyang and closely cooperate with the UN to make sure the aid reaches the people in need. Pan expressed his appreciation for South Korea's offer to provide more than $6 million in aid through UNICEF in July, saying that it will help at least 20,000 children in North Korea get vaccinated. He also praised President Park's North Korea policy, saying that her push for a trust-building process with the North has made possible the normalization of the Kaesong Industrial Complex and working-level talks for inter-Korean family reunions. Oh Jin-ju, Arirang News.
Korea's fourth multi-purpose satellite, the Arirang 5, has been successfully launched into space.
The latest addition to the country's satellite series will provide more comprehensive observation data for Korea, enabling high-definition monitoring at any time under any weather condition. Our Song Ji-sun has more.
Korea's multi-purpose satellite, Arirang 5, has continually confirmed its successful deployment into its target orbit. The satellite was launched at 11:39 p.m. Thursday night Korea time at Russia's Yasny site in Russia's Dnepr rocket and separated from its fairing and carrier as scheduled. Its first beacon signals were initially picked up by the Troll satellite station in Antarctica 32 minutes following the launch, and at 5:35 a.m. Friday morning Korea time, about 6 hours after blastoff, Arirang 5 made contact with Daejeon's ground station of Korea Aerospace Research Institute. The most notable feature of this latest satellite is its SAR, short for synthetic aperture radar, that can observe and photograph the Earth's surface at any time, regardless of weather conditions.
Arirang 5 emits microwaves that will be reflected after reaching the Earth's surface. That data enable us to obtain three-dimensional images with accurate figures.
After 6 months of adjusting its orbit and testing its assigned tasks, Arirang 5 will orbit the Earth at an average altitude of 550 kilometers, monitoring the ocean, the environment, and natural disasters, along with its predecessors, the Arirang 2 and 3 satellites. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Before your day ends and another begins, get the latest news live from Seoul.
Residents whose features restrictions is on the rise.
Closing ceremony.
Expert analysis from Asia's heartbeat.
The legislature, circumstances.
With a viewpoint only Korea's global network can provide.
The United States, the latest report.
Unrivaled access from a team always on standby.
Meaning came on to news are trying to cover up the South.
Here's some positive news on the economic front. Business surveys show that the world economy is showing signs of recovery with better than expected business growth in Europe, a rebound in China's large manufacturing sector, as well as improved employment figures from the United States. Yulian reports on the worldwide rebound.
New business data shows the world economy is finally picking up steam. The United States, which is an important anchor for growth across the globe, saw its manufacturing expand in August at its fastest pace in 5 months. Claims for unemployment insurance, meanwhile, stood at a 6-year low, according to financial firm Market. Over in Europe, Market said business activity across the Eurozone picked up at a faster pace than expected, putting the Flash Composite Purchasing Managers Index in August at over 51. A reading over 50 indicates expansion. This was also the highest index recorded since mid-2011. Market also said Eurozone's largest economy, Germany, saw its business activity grow at the fastest pace in 7 months. Moving on over to China, the world's second largest economy, the index there rose to a 4-month high of 50.1 from July's reading of 47.7, showing moderate growth. Emerging countries, however, face a bleak economic outlook as speculation that the U.S. Federal Reserve will slow its asset purchases has triggered a foreign capital pullout. But economists say the rebound in Europe and the United States, along with more stability in China's economy, will support overall global growth. Yulian, Arirang News.
As Hyundai Motor Union members continue with the partial strikes they've been staging since Tuesday, Korea's car industry is groaning over stagnant domestic demand, falling production, and exports. Hwang Ji-ae reports on the roadblocks facing the country's automobile sector.
CEOs from Korean car and auto parts manufacturers and the country's Minister of Land, Infrastructure and Transport, Seo Seung-hwan, recently sat down together to discuss the state of the automobile industry. During the meeting, Minister Seo asked for the company's labor and management to come up with ways to work together in the face of a 6% drop in the nation's automobile exports in the first 7 months of this year from the same period a year ago.
We will have to work towards minimizing negative impacts on the domestic auto industry and also improving those conditions.
The local car industry's production has dropped this year and last year, and the rate of decrease in sales was 5 times greater than in the first 7 months of this year from a year earlier. Domestic sales of Korean auto parts and automobiles also dropped in 2012 and 2013, while exports fell for the first time since 2009. Experts attribute the dip in sales and production to strikes from labor unions at Hyundai Motor and GM Korea.
This is not just a problem limited to Hyundai. Auto parts and other related industries are also taking a blow from the strike.
While Korean automobile makers are trying to keep their heads above water, even at home local sales of foreign brands rose over 20% as of July this year from the same period a year earlier. It's no surprise that the market share of import cars has now risen to more than 1/10 of the Korean automobile market, almost double that of 2010. Although Korea's car industry is continuing its efforts to overcome the roadblocks of falling production, sales, and exports, automakers such as Hyundai face increasing challenges with ongoing strikes that some say could dim the outlook for the industry. Hwang Ji-ae, Arirang News.
Now, turning to the latest in Syria, world powers are formulating a response to the Syrian government's alleged use of chemical weapons against its own people. The United Nations and several Western countries are calling for a comprehensive probe to be launched right away. Our Kim Young-gil reports.
Details about what exactly happened remain murky, but Syrian activists claim these people lying lifeless on the ground were the victims of a gas attack carried out Wednesday by Syrian government forces near the capital, Damascus. France's foreign minister says that if the Bashar al-Assad's regime is proven to have used chemical weapons against its own people, the international community has to respond with force.
There would have to be reaction with force in Syria from the international community, but there is no question of sending troops on the ground.
The deputy spokesperson for UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said Thursday that the attacks needed to be probed without delay.
The Secretary General remains deeply troubled by the reports of the alleged use of chemical weapons in Syria. The Secretary General believes that the incidents reported yesterday need to be investigated without delay.
A top UN official has been dispatched to Syria to seek permission for UN investigators to visit the Damascus suburbs that were allegedly attacked. It remains unclear whether the Syrian government will give the inspectors who are already in Syria access to the sites. The U.S. is unable to say whether chemical weapons were used in the alleged attacks, and it is trying to figure out through its own intelligence sources.
At this time, right now, we are unable to conclusively determine CW use.
The Obama administration has said any U.S. response must await confirmation of the attacks. Russia and China has called for a thorough investigation into the attack, adding that the UN chemical weapons inspectors should fully consult with the Syrian government. Syrian activists claim more than 1,300 people were killed in Wednesday's attack. If proven, it would be the world's most deadly chemical weapons attack since the 1980s. The Syrian government continues to deny the army used chemical weapons. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
The news of a leak of highly radioactive water at Japan's crippled nuclear power plant in Fukushima is raising concerns that this could be just the beginning of a new disaster.
And while the reliability of the plant is dwindling, with the seriousness of the leak being raised to level 3 from level 1 earlier this week, we delve into the current situation there and what is being done to contain the damage with our Kim Han-bin, who's joining us here in the studio. Han-bin, tell us how serious is the problem?
Tokyo Electric Power Company officials said that plant workers apparently overlooked signs of leaks and failed to notice an open valve for several weeks. The result was 300 tons of water with radioactive particles such as cesium and strontium linked to bone cancer leaking out of Fukushima Daiichi plant and into the Pacific Ocean. Japan has come up with numerous methods to contain the leak, but all of them have failed so far.
So there have been many ideas floating around on how to contain this leak. Are authorities confident that their ideas are going to work?
Well, the latest idea is building an underground containment wall made of ice to try to halt the flow. But there's too much uncertainty to be confident about whether it'll work. The containment wall won't be completed until 2015, meaning that contaminated water will continue to leak from Fukushima for the next couple years. If and when it is completed, the wall will be 1.4 kilometers in length, which will make it the world's longest continuous stretch of artificially frozen Earth. But how effective will it be? I talked to an expert, and here's what he said.
It's a serious issue, and it's going to be hard to contain it. First of all, the area is too vast, and there are too many radioactive leaks. Concerns and doubts are on the rise about whether they'll be able to successfully seal the leaks.
Now, Han-bin, can you tell us more about the nuclear particles absorbed in the water and how long it will actually take to reach us here in Korea?
Sure. Well, the majority of radioactive materials are cesium, tritium, and strontium. And that is what's flowing the water at Fukushima. And of those materials, cesium is most predominant. It makes up nearly 90% of the radioactive substances. And it can travel in water, while the other two, strontium and tritium, sink to the ocean floor because they are too heavy. These two substances are the ones you have to worry about because they can accumulate in your body for roughly 30 years. But since they sink to the bottom of the ocean floor, there's little concern to be had. For a better understanding of what is going on, let's have a look at a graph. The Fukushima disaster occurred in March 2011, leaking hundreds of tons of radioactive water and hundreds of thousands of becquerels into the ocean, a becquerel being the way radioactivity is measured. The radioactive materials traveled in ocean currents to the middle of the Pacific Ocean. As time goes on, the radioactive levels of those materials traveling around the Pacific will diminish. Currently, that material is estimated to contain 4 becquerels of radiation per cubic meter, which is a 2 becquerel increase from before the accident. By 2016, the current will move the contaminated water to Western Canada or the northwestern U.S., and by that time, the contaminated water will be at 3.5 becquerels, a slight decrease from its current level. By the time that water makes its way all around the Pacific and back to Korea, it will be the year 2022. And by that time, the contamination level will have decreased it to its normal state from before the accident to about 2 becquerels per cubic meter.
Well, here in Korea, consumers are very concerned that fish from Japan may be contaminated with too much radiation. What is the Korean government doing to address these concerns?
For that, let's look at our chart. The Korean government set a safe limit of radiation in food at 300 becquerels per kilogram. If food items are under that level, they have a green light to be imported into Korea. The highest radiation level found in a fish imported from Japan since 2011 was 97 becquerels. Nowhere near the limit. Japan lowered its import limit from 500 to 100 becquerels in April 2012. Other countries like the U.S. have limits as high as 1,200.
So is it safe to consume them?
Well, an expert I spoke with has the answer. Let's take a look.
So 300 becquerel is a really low amount. And if you eat almost every day, and it is going above the dose limit of the 5 millisievert in a year. So if you consume just one time or maybe several times, it doesn't matter at all, because we observed almost other radioactive sources such as potassium-40 is abundant in the food. It's other food. It is very natural sources.
So basically, Dr. Kang is saying that radiation is all around us, and even if humans were to eat fish contaminated with cesium, whatever radiation were to enter the body will be released in time, with no ill effects. Experts I have talked to, as well as others throughout the world, believe the levels of radiations are not much of a concern at this point in time, and would only become a concern if highly radioactive fish from near the disaster site are imported.
All right, Hyunbin, thanks so much for that coverage.
Anytime LA Dodgers rookie sensation Do Hyun-jin pitches, he's going to top the sports headlines here in Korea.
And Stephen Che joins us now in the Sports Center to tell us about his upcoming start this weekend. Stephen.
Hey guys, the Dodgers lefty will be on the mound in his team's upcoming matchup against the Boston Red Sox on Saturday at Dodger Stadium. The 26-year-old Ryu is looking for his 13th win of the season after failing to do so against Miami earlier this week. He faces the AL East leading Red Sox, who've hit .318 and scored 5.9 runs in interleague play, both league-leading figures. The Dodgers are hot, having won all but 3 games this month, and 9 of the last 10 with Ryu on the mound. Stepping onto the hard court, the U.S. Open Tennis Championships will open on Monday at Flushing Meadows for the 4th and final major of the year. The tournament draw has put the world's top tennis stars on a collision course to determine the champions. For the men's side, last year's champ Andy Murray will have to get through top-ranked Novak Djokovic for a chance to repeat. Meanwhile, for the ladies, odds are that the top-seeded Serena Williams will defend her title as she's on a hot streak this year. And safe at home, it's time to check out Friday's top KBO matchup. The Tucson Bears and the Samsung Lions battled it out in Daegu. The Bears looking to end their 4-game skid, the Lions looking sharp. And in the second, 2 men on Lee Won-suk singles to bring the man home, starting the streak. 2 scores later, it's Min Byung-hun's hit that brings home 2 more. It's 5-0 Tucson. We head to the bottom of the second, the Lions' Kim Sang-soo. He's going for the single that hits in the run. They add 2 more later. It's 5-3, Bears still up. And we go on to the 5th, the Bears' Min Byung-hun again. Solo shot to left field. Tucson up 6-3. And Tucson is still up in this game 13-4 with 1 out left against Samsung in the bottom of the 9th. And now let's look at the scores from around the league. We have LG leading SK 11-4 in the bottom of the 9th. NC over Nexon 6-5. And Kia and Hanwha's game was canceled. And now that does it for me here in the Sports Center. This has been Stephen Che. Check back at midnight for the latest in the world of sports.
Time to go over to our Kwon for the latest forecast. So, a happy Friday.
A very happy Friday, guys. And it's not only Friday, but it's also Choseol here in Korea, a solar term marking the end of summer.
And the weather seemed to follow suit today.
Yes, thanks to the nationwide precipitation and along with the fact that we had daytime highs in the 20s in much of the country today. Now, the rain, meanwhile, is still falling lightly in some southern regions where it'll also continue until tomorrow. Now, heavy rain alerts have thankfully all been lifted, but still get ready for chances of precipitation at rates of 30 millimeters per hour, along with thunder activity in the southern half of the nation until Saturday afternoon. Now, although things have cooled down, it's still gonna be pretty hot in the central regions where heat wave advisories remain. But with a low of 23 degrees in Seoul, it'll feel cooler now in the morning at least. Highs reach the low 30s in Seoul and Daegu and the high 20s in Gwangju and Busan. And low 30s over in Daejeon and Jeju Island, while Dokdo and Munkumgang hit 28 and 20 degrees respectively. And that's the forecast for now, and that was my last weather forecast on Primetime News, but I'll be back with one more after midnight.
And that's our broadcast on this Friday night. I'm Yoo Ji-hye in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend. We'll see you soon.